This weekend is the 80th birthday of my beautiful father Jack and his twin sister Jill. Jack Lewis Harrison and Jill Lois Harrison, and you can imagine how much mileage people have got out of that over the years. It looks like there could be 80, 100 people coming because they have such an amazing social life.
What kind of music are you going to have at the party?
Oh, well, Libby Hammer and her quintet, which is a similar sort of a group that my father would have played in with Jill many years ago. And so they'll be playing jazz of the 50s and taking Jack and Jill down memory lane.
If it ain't got that swing.
Jill, no, I'm not sure. Jill and I, we've been very close all throughout our life, for sure, right from the very beginning. No, Jill's my womb mate, for sure, because for the first 9 months we shared the same room. So she's my womb mate. So anyway, we had a lot of fun together, Jill and I and brother Ray. When we grew up, we were playing in this little dance band around Perth, and we actually grew up with the people that danced with us, and we had a lot of fun. But Jill and I thought we better just play you one little tune. But it's a little bit different. It's going to be in the form of a piano duet. Actually, I'll transport you back 60 years. Yeah, 60 years. Or Jill and I are transporting you back 60 years. And we're playing it on Jodi's piano because we want to sound like Winifred Atwell. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tonight, in the first part of our programme, we present 2 more concertos in the series First Desk. Jack Harrison was born in Western Australia and revealed an early interest in music. Piano lessons, however, were soon replaced by clarinet lessons, and study of this instrument, in conjunction with the saxophone, soon enabled him to form a dance band with his brother and twin sister. 2 years later, he began a small recording group for the ABC, and Jack Harrison and his music became well known throughout Australia. Later, he joined the South Australian Symphony Orchestra, but eventually returned to Perth to join the West Australian Symphony Orchestra. In 1966, he became principal clarinetist, and since then has been heard widely in chamber music and as a soloist on radio and television, as well as in public concerts.
When my dad, Jack Harrison, was only 5 years old, he started learning the piano from his dad. But the thing that really showed everyone that he may have musical talent was a mouth organ that his older brother Bill gave him. It was in his Christmas stocking.
Jack, do you have your harmonica?
I do. My first love. An old one, a very old tune. When I grow to an older dream, I don't think you would know that one. It goes back many years.
And before long, Dad was able to play tunes on this harmonica and ended up going for competitions accompanied by his dad.
I remember them quite well. I remember the first one was in the Grand Theatre. I don't think it's around anymore, but it was in Murray Street. And it was a search for talent, and I played Plenty of Money in You, I think it was, and I won £75, which in those days I think was a reasonable amount of money.
An enormous amount of money.
How old was he then?
He was 8, I believe, and chose to spend some of the money building a brick and tile cubby house in the backyard. And we're so lucky. There was a reel-to-reel recording that Dad had, and we had it transferred. It hasn't transferred brilliantly, but there's even Dad speaking on it before his voice broke, which is delightful for me to hear.
Quiet, please. Now, what are you going to say, Jack? Plenty of money in you. Well, you've stuck the right title, too. Plenty of money in you. Well, now, that's the title. Plenty of Money in You, played by Master Jack Harrison.
In 1940, at the age of 9, we travelled over to Sydney, and I entered into the Australia Amateur Hour. That was very popular in those days with no television, it was only radio.
The makers of Rinso and Lifebuoy present the 498th programme of Australia's Amateur Hour. A full hour with the amateurs of Australia relayed over...
We went across by train. It was called the Transcontinental train in those days. Great experience for me. And I remember playing in the studios there. They had little ads to say, Jack Harrison plays Hoona harmonicas. Yes, that was back in the early days, yes. And also my father took me round to different clubs, and we played at army barracks and so forth. I remember there was one barracks on the way down to Rockingham, Coogee. That was a big army barracks there. I remember going, and as a boy, playing harmonica solo with my father on piano, usually, playing the accompaniment. I remember travelling over to Rottnest and playing over there. There were American troops over there and Australian, because it had been commandeered for the army.
Do you remember that tune, Plenty of Money in You, to this day?
I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. Try and work it out.
My Nana Harrison, who lived till she was nearly 90, she actually had the twins on her birthday. So it was a monumental birthday present for her. And she wasn't expecting twins because it was her third pregnancy, and I think she just thought that she'd put on a bit of weight. So Jill came first. Jack came second and was a total surprise.
When I say my name's Jack, I say I have a twin sister, Jill, so my name actually is Jack and not John, because I can't have John and Jill. And I say my parents must have had a sense of humour to call us Jack and Jill.
Why did they call you Jack and Jill?
I don't know, and I forgot to ask them. So I'll never know that one, Robin.
Have you been playing, Jack? Hello, Robin.
Oh, hello, Jill.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Jill.
Can you describe what it was like growing up in Perth in the 1930s in your musical family with your twin Jack?
We had a lovely childhood. We're very privileged, I think, don't you think, Jack?
I'm sure we did, yeah. Making music together and...
Yes. We had our lovely music room and I had a grand piano to practice on. Jack had practiced in the dining room and I'd practice in the music room, and occasionally we'd take it in turns, but we practiced together.
And Dad would move from you
To you.
to help you practice, and then he'd go to me and help me with different parts and how to practice the practice technique.
So he taught us very well, didn't he?
He did, indeed. A true musician.
But it paid off, you know. I thanked him in later years for having done what he did.
These pictures are of my father's father, William Harrison. We called him Old Bill. He was a pianist. William went to World War I and was a bugler. He was only 18 when he joined up.
No, he didn't talk about the war. No, they didn't in those days. And I don't think we ever talked about it, did we, or ever asked him?
No, I don't think we did. He was quite a nervy
He was very
character,
nervous.
very serious.
Serious, yes, he was serious. And, he was nervous and couldn't stand very loud noises, had a very sensitive ear.
And he came home and started performing.
He actually came back from the First World War and started his own orchestra. And the orchestra played for the silent picture movies. And when the talkies came in, of course, he was out of a job. So he then set up a dance band.
When my Nana Harrison passed away, there was an envelope in a box that was full of newspaper cuttings of my grandfather's band. For example, he put an advertisement in the local paper and it says, Bill Harrison, the digger pianist, specialises in soldier smoke socials. And his orchestra is advertised for snap and pep. There we go. Subiaco Masonic Hall dancers, dancing every Saturday evening. The first grand ball of the season, Saturday 9th of July at 8 p.m, Harrison's full jazz orchestra, searchlights, streamers, confetti, supper. Here we go.
At the age of 13, Dad said to me, look, it's no good, son, playing harmonica all your life. You need a real instrument. So I was actually fascinated with the French horn, but Dad wisely pointed out to me and said, if you play the French horn, you'll only be going down one track, and that's the classical line, because French horns usually only play in symphony orchestras. But he said, take on the clarinet, and you can go symphonically, or you can go the jazz line. So he wisely steered me onto the clarinet. I had lessons from the then principal clarinet in Wasso, which was the Perth Symphony Orchestra back in those days. A chap named Percy Newton, he was one of the first conductors of the Perth Symphony Orchestra. I remember getting on my bike and strapping my clarinet and riding from Nedlands over to Claremont and having the lessons and riding back. They were lovely days.
Dad wasn't doing particularly well at school. He was at Scotch and he was king of the cuts at Scotch, his claim to fame.
And after a year, my father said, look, you're wasting my money, because I wasn't not much of an academic. So he said, son, I think you better come home and practice the clarinet.
I have to say that Jill wasn't that happy about leaving school. She would have liked to have stayed, but because Jack was going, she was going too.
And my father said, well, I'm taking you out of school because you can't go to school and play professionally. And I loved school and I wanted to stay at school. I don't think Jack had the same opinion.
I remember 18 out of 100 for algebra, 18 out of 100 for geometry. And I thought to myself, well, what's that got to do with music anyway?
So they were doing 4 or 5 hours practice a day under the tutelage of their father, who was a fairly strict man.
My father, I think, was a very clever man because he literally organised, particularly Jack and I, into our careers. He almost had it planned out and he knew exactly what road to go down.
At 14, I took a few lessons on saxophone, which is very similar to the clarinet, so it didn't take long. And Jill was a lovely pianist, and she had the flair to be able to play chords, and Ray was on drums, my brother Ray.
They formed a dance band and started playing with their brother Ray on drums, then added a double bass player and whomever else they needed, and started getting gigs around town.
And we were quite young at 15, but we were earning a lot of money and the phone didn't stop ringing. We were inundated with engagements. In those days, I think if any teenager could do something or earn money, the parents tended to say, that's it, you've got a job now, you're not going back to school. And also our parents went through the Depression, and I think that had a lot to do with it. A penny was a penny in those days, and if you could earn money, that was the start of your job.
Presenting tonight the lad who we claim is the youngest band leader in Australia. Jack Harrison, who has already appeared in National Fair as a soloist, is just 16 years of age. When did you first get interested in music, Jack?
Well, I started playing the mouth organ when I was 4 years of age.
Which is some time ago, eh?
Yes, a few years later I learnt to play the saxophone and clarinet.
And very well you play them too. Now, when did you get the idea of forming a band?
Well, my brother's a pretty hot drummer and my sister a fairly good pianist, so we got together.
I see. And is the band still a purely family affair?
Oh, no, we've added the trumpet, guitar and bass now.
And the band is fully professional, Jack?
Yes, fully professional.
I see. And you got a lot of fun out of it?
Yes, got a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the perfect job, isn't it? Getting paid for something that's fun to do. Thank you very much, Jack. And Mr. Ringmaster, let the other states start looking for a younger band leader than Western Australia's 16-year-old Jack Harrison. Now, here's his band going to town in Softly as in a Morning Sunrise.
We were actually earning professional money at the age of 15, Jill and I. Ray was 17. So the money rolled in. My father was sort of the manager. I was out of school and we were playing 5 nights a week.
In those days they would ring up and you would ask them, what would you like, modern or old time? And the average would say, well, we'll have a bit of modern, a bit of old time.
Yeah.
But I can remember Jack getting to the stage where he couldn't stand playing old-time music and used to say, I'm sorry, we only play modern music. So we'd give away a job because we refused to play old-time music, and that's how we were earning money in those days.
They were great days growing up and being able to play at dances where all our friends were there.
There was a lot of publicity. We seemed to always be having our photos in the magazine or in the paper, and it was quite exciting, except that we had no social life at all because we were always playing. All these teenagers wanted us to play at their party because they were the same age as us. And it was quite exciting.
We played at places like Kings Park Tennis Club, and still right up till today I have people coming up and say, I danced at KP, I danced at Kings Park to your music, which always gives me a little bit of a thrill because I look back at those days as very happy days.
Hello, Robin. Come in.
Thank you.
Nicer in here than out there, I can tell you. Now, where would you like to sit? My name's Judy Mitchell, and when I was young, at about the age of between 14 and 16, we used to dance to the music of Jack Harrison at Kings Park Tennis Club and Mount Lawley Tennis Club.
My name's Berwin Grieve, and we went to dances at which Jack played with his brother and sister, and it was fabulous.
Well, yeah,
I
you
don't
just
know
couldn't
anything
sit
about
still.
music, but I loved it.
Yeah, you couldn't sit still. They were so alive. It was such good music. There was Jill on the piano, Ray on drums,
And
Jack at the clarinet.
I thought Jack was a celebrity. I used to have
Well, I thought he was-
newspaper cuttings of him all around my mirror.
Yes, he really was. He was so outstanding musically. Quick step, foxtrot.
We didn't do things like Pride of Erin and that, did we?
No,
No, that's old-fashioned.
No, they were old. And then, of course, there was also coming on to the jive business. You were a good jiver.
Not particularly, but I did it.
She was good. No kidding.
Anyway, and there was a lot of jazz, wasn't there?
A lot of jazz. Tremendous amount of jazz. Because that was right in, yeah.
And I had little bits of paper with the numbered dances on it and the people we were dancing with.
Oh.
That was when I was going out with one person and every second dance was his. God, I thought I was made.
Dad always complained that being in the band, he never got to dance with the pretty girls. He did spy the pretty girls because he had the best vantage point. And one of those girls was my mum, Marcia Chater, as she was.
Were there a few girls after Jack?
Not really.
I don't think so, because Marcia was always sitting there.
She had a claim.
Marcia used to sit on a chair just next to the band because she was going out with Jack then.
Marcia was a very pretty girl too.
She was.
A very pretty girl. Beautiful, in fact.
Actually, we went to kindergarten together. And she was always the fairy queen. I think I was a pixie or something, because Marcia was always the one with the big blue eyes and beautiful blonde hair. She was gorgeous.
She really was. They were just happy together, weren't they? I would say from that age of 15 they were, because she was only about 19 when she married, wasn't she?
Probably right.
She is.
Marcia was my mentor, I'd say. She knew exactly how I felt before I went off to a concert. She knew exactly when I was right on top or when I was just a bit below top. She was my very best critic. And unfortunately, Marcia passed away in 2005, and we've been together for 52 years.
She had to send a taxi with his instrument to the symphony orchestra once because he'd left it behind. She was the matriarch.
She was.
She used to run the place. She organised them all. Don't you agree?
She did. She's a very strong person and very, very capable of running a smooth ship. He was a bit of a devil too. He would always look for a rule around that he could possibly break. He was a bit of a tyke. I think he would have been more lawless if he hadn't had Marcia.
Look, they were marvellous days, the happiest days, and very popular in those days with Golden Wedding. We always had to play Golden Wedding, and I remember I had a little trick where, coming up to the high notes at the end, I'd jump up on the chair and hold my clarinet high in the air for the top notes, and all the dancers would gather round and think that was marvellous. I was lucky that I didn't fall off and break a leg.
We're now to hear Duet Concertino for clarinet, bassoon, strings and harp by Richard Strauss. This work was composed in 1947, and this is its first performance in Australia. The soloists are Jack Harrison, clarinetist, and Jill Harrison, bassoonist.
This is Into the Music on RN. Robin Johnston here with stories of the clarinetist Jack Harrison. We're meeting Jack and some of his musical family and friends, including his daughter Jodie and Jack's twin, Jill.
How old was I when I started playing the bassoon? 17. My father just said one day, "Jill, you're going to now learn the bassoon."
bassoon might have been perhaps a little bit more restrictive than the clarinet. As far as...
Oh, it's more difficult. Definitely more difficult than the clarinet. It's a beautiful sound. I loved playing the bassoon. I really loved it. And I worked very hard at it. I won a scholarship to go to Adelaide Conservatorium, Elder Conservatorium, to study for 2 years. They were forming the West Australian Symphony Orchestra, and so I came back and got the job.
But we never worked that much together, only one or 2 years in Wasso, apart from little woodwind trios and so forth. But Jill played mainly in the Victorian State Orchestra, which serviced the ballet and the opera. At the age of 19, the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, Henry Cripps conducting, he'd been to Perth conducting, and I played in his amateur orchestra. He had a good first clarinet, but the second clarinet was an old chap who was just retiring, and he wrote over and said, if you come over here, you have a job in the Adelaide Orchestra.
You know, he never did an audition, because in those days you were just asked, would you like this job? And now you have to be able to play everything note perfect, you know, on the day, at the red hot moment to get the job. It is so difficult. And was only there a matter of months. Then was invited back to be second clarinet with the WA Symphony.
A job became available on second clarinet in the Wasso, newly formed Wasso. So I headed back to Perth, much to Henry Cripps' disgust. I remember him saying, it is a dirty, rotten trick you're playing on me, Mr. Harrison.
Once he got into the orchestra, he really was living the split life of classical music in the daytime and jazz at night time.
At one stage, I'd be on a Friday and Saturday, the 2 busiest nights, and I say, look, I'm sorry, I have a symphony concert. If you don't mind me putting in a deputy till 10:15, I'll come along and play till 12.
Norman Burke, can you recall when you first met Jack Harrison?
We were 12 years old, and we were in the Perth Youth Orchestra together. And I joined the ABC and became a music producer. And of course, Jack joined the West Australian Symphony Orchestra. And I spent a lot of time recording and broadcasting the music of Jack Harrison.
When Dad came back to Perth, he was about 20 and was offered a weekly radio program with the ABC.
Was called Jack Harrison and His Music. Music arranged by Jack himself and his father. It was a very successful national program.
I think he'd become so popular with his dance band and so well known around Perth that they thought he'd be the right person to get a bit of a following, and indeed he was.
Tunes sentimental, melodies gentle, and all instrumental. From Perth comes a half hour of melodies for most moods, presented by Jack Harrison and his music.
Also the fact that he had such a diversity in as much as he could play jazz and classics, and he could also play saxophones and clarinet and mouth organ, and I'm ashamed to say he even played trombone on occasions. Yes, very nasty trombone. I know that my grandfather did a lot of the arrangements. They were very corny, some of them, you know, Holiday in Honduras and stuff like that, but very popular in those days.
Well, before we began the show, someone jokingly remarked, why don't you call this the Harrison Show? And glancing around the studio, you could pick out 4 Harrisons. Let's conclude the proceedings on a Latin American kick, with Jack Harrison and his music turning in a piece in samba tempo, Tico Tico.
Anyway, Peter Harrison was an announcer in the old days. He always used to make the announcement. No relation. He used to say that. Yeah. It's Peter Harrison at announcing this program, but I'm no relation. However, we asked him if he would
play
to play the Shakers
in
a particular piece. And my father had made the Shakers himself In those days you couldn't buy them.
And
for
he
the
put ball
but
bearings.
He put ball bearings in it.
To make the shaking noise.
And on one of these occasions, we're playing the samba, all of a sudden I'm playing the bassoon, I'm getting shot in the face and everybody's looking around. The whole thing had come apart and the
ball bearings
had gone everywhere. They're rolling down the floor, and in the end there was no shakers. And that was quite a scream. Thank goodness it was the last piece on the program. That went over the
That
head.
was our Father Bill.
This has been a half hour of Jack Harrison and his music. We hope you enjoyed the sounds which were made by Laszlo Vidak violin, Stephanie James piano, Jill Harrison bassoon, John Mason bass, Burton Williams percussion, Jack Harrison clarinet and harmonica, compere Peter Harrison. We invite you to listen again.
He always had a great sense of humour, Jack. And conductors a lot of them were known for not having one. And I have known Jack to have set up a couple from time to time. I remember one recording we were doing in modern contemporary Australian music, and some of it was not very approachable. And I know that somebody who'd be nameless played She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain all through this. Nobody ever heard it. I know that was a bit naughty, but sometimes you have to do things to survive, you know?
Oh, I shouldn't really comment, but yes, I'd have a few sayings. If I didn't like a piece of music, I'd say in a loud voice, give it the asbestos test, see if it can burn. That was one I remember. I'd always say it loud enough so the conductor could hear too.
He could just do anything standing on his head. If there was a jazz part required in an orchestral score, he would do it. He was ideal for that sort of thing. Improvisation, he was always available. That was one of his strong points. He was always available to do whatever came around the corner, and did it superbly. He was a great muso.
Music was my life, apart from the family life, which came in with all the children. All our children, they're all musical, they're all in music. Going from the oldest Jay, he was in Wasso for 30 years playing cor anglais and oboe.
Because it was such a musical family and music was everything, just such a flood of music of all types in the house most of the time. One could almost say that, well, yes, you're going to be a musician. I could see that as being my career, and especially being in an orchestra. This is the oboe, although I did first of all start learning piano from my grandfather. Like all of us, we had to learn at least up to about grade 4 AMEB before we could stop the piano and go on to something else. Grandfather was a very sort of cut and dry, this is how you do it kind of teacher. We would go over to their place in Nedlands on a Sunday night for a family dinner, and I would be given a piano lesson before the dinner. Then I actually started to learn the clarinet, and I learnt the clarinet from my father. Lots of people say, oh, you can't learn from your father, you know, it's not going to work. But in our case, it did. I think we all had such respect for him as a musician.
You worked with your dad every day for years. What was that like?
Interesting. And I'm kind of glad in a way that I ended up playing oboe and not clarinet and sitting right next to him. But yeah, I did enjoy the fact that, you know, I was there, he was there, and because he's been such a role model for me, and I think for my siblings as well, both musically and as a father. And actually to hear him playing, again, still would inspire me in the orchestra to give my best, I think.
Yes, I remembered when he started, and I listened and enjoyed the way he settled in and finished up a very fine cor anglais player, and I used to sit back and thoroughly enjoy hearing my son play these lovely solos.
Well, the hackneyed one, of course, is the solo from the New World Symphony by Dvorak, which I played many, many times, and towards the end of my career got a bit sick of playing it, but it is a nice solo. At the end of those kind of solos, it's I guess, like the end of a big cricket match or a football match. You go, oh, I got through it, and it's how I wanted to play.
The next boy down, Kimberley, he's Director of Music for St Mary's College in Karrinyup.
At school, I just thought, I'll be a musician. I wouldn't say I have regrets, but I do wonder if I hadn't just accepted that particular path, I might have made a reasonably good architect, who knows.
Do you think you might be able to play a bit of trumpet for us, Kim?
Oh man, I tell you, I only play the trumpet these days when I'm really provoked, Robin, so I don't even know if it works. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Who was your first music teacher?
My first music teacher was my grandfather, Bill Harrison. Wanted to be a brass player. There were too many woodwind players in the household because Jay was playing clarinet, learning from Dad, and I figured that I would go off on a bit of a tangent. The trumpet looked pretty good, loved it, didn't look back. Right here I have a family heirloom. It's a bugle from World War I, in fact my grandfather's bugle. We went up to my cousin Trevor's property in York, and Trevor disappeared inside and reappeared with this bugle and said, Tim, I think you should have this because you are the brass player in the family. Now, I've played a few bugles in my day, and I had a very low opinion on bugles. As far as brass players go, I figured that a bugle was about as low as you could get. But this is an absolutely beautiful bugle, and it still has attached to the bottom of it the original twine and rope that the light horsemen would have used to put the bugle around their neck as they gallop off to wherever they galloped. That's a pretty interesting family connection as well, because when I decided to play the trumpet, it was without really any knowledge that there was somewhat of a tradition with my grandfather being a bugler in the war. Beautiful sound, isn't it? Yeah, it's a beautiful sound.
And Jodie, she was a very proficient oboe player and now has taken on this job of being an agent for musicians around town and doing very well in the musical scene there.
Hello, Solo to Symphony. Jodie speaking. Okay, I think what we decided was that setup would be by 6:30. From my point of view, I guess, is that I was the last of the Harrisons and I had two brothers successful in music ahead of me. So it was rather a hard act to follow. But having said that, I still haven't been able to move away from the career, even though it's gone in different directions. I think classical music is something, once you're involved in it, it really is a bug that bites you, and it's difficult to want to do something else. Yes, and then Libby will turn up for the sound check round about 7. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like sitting in a symphony orchestra, and as woodwind players, we're right in the middle, so you're surrounded by sound. It's a lot of people all working together absolutely minutely and producing an amazing result. And we really are privileged to have felt that, because not many people do. But the moment you felt it, the moment you've sat in a Mahler symphony getting to the heights of, you'll never go back. It's amazing.
There's not a feeling quite like it. There's playing in an orchestra when you're playing beautiful music. You become involved, and some of us sort of do shed a tear.
And you get just such an adrenaline rush from being part of that performance. It really does move you inside. There's those occasions where you think, oh yes, this is why I do it.
One of those concerts, I had my 3 children all playing in the one concert. Kimberly was in as an extra trumpet player, Jodie was in as an extra oboe player, and Jay was in as cor anglais, and I was playing principal clarinet. I remember that and was very proud that night.
So Dad still is the longest serving musician in the Oiseau. He was there for 43 years, which is an awfully long time.
It's a strange life, because you sit in the same chair every day for year on year with the same person to the right of you. So you had to get on with each other.
Well, to me it was actually like being in a big extended family. It's a wonderful career because you're challenged all the time.
Each week there'd be a brand new set of tunes to play, symphonies and concertos, so there wasn't the boredom that you'd have in some jobs where you did the same thing day in, day out, year in, year out. So in that regard, I think I'm very lucky.
He was always the consummate professional in terms of his performance. When a difficult piece would come up, he would always practice it really thoroughly at home and drive Mum mad. Sometimes I think hearing the same phrase practiced over and over and over again because it was a difficult one.
Rehearse thoroughly. Dad always said you had to be 110% because 10% would go with nerves. And then you could play almost automatically if you'd practiced enough.
Sometimes 3 or 4 bars would wreck the whole night because of a difficult 3 or 4 bars. You're thinking about it all night. Sometimes you did work under a bit of pressure.
Dad managed beautifully. When something was hard technically, though, there was a bit of tension around the house, I have to say. And I know all of those excerpts very well. Yeah.
Give Dad a wide berth because Daphnis and Chloe's coming up, kind of thing. You knew when there was an important gig coming.
There's, of course, many solos. Some of them, although they're big solos, are actually quite nice to play, I think, like the Galanta Dances by Kodály has a beautiful clarinet solo in it.
And then he did lots of concertos as well. He did the Mozart and Weber, and he actually premiered the Copland Concerto in Australia.
I think one of my dad's favourites was the Rachmaninoff Second Symphony, second movement. He played that solo exquisitely.
A beautiful clarinet solo. It's such a simple melody. Rachmaninoff had this way of writing such a simple melody.
I think Dad's sound and his phrasing as a musician was really sublime. Just a wonderful, innate sense of musicality.
Well, his sound, in a way, I think is quite unique because it blends a bit of the jazz sound into his classical playing. It gives his sound a little bit more of a roundness. It probably blends a little more in the orchestra.
I think he was a beautiful orchestral player. Even now I listen to old recordings and think it was beautiful. He had a lovely sound that he had learnt through the English school of playing at the time.
I used to like the English sound that the English players got out of their clarinet much more than perhaps American or French. A more relaxed and open sound. I realised that a lot of players played with a tense throat, which gave them an edgier clarinet sound, but with a relaxed throat it became a more round sound, and that's what I was pursuing. Yes. Every individual in his mind has the sound that he wants to come out of the clarinet.
He was romantic, was able to really interpret stuff beautifully, so a really good musician, in other words.
And looking back over my career, I remember starting off, as you do as a teenager, with a big ego and everything's a piece of cake. I remember playing solos and thoroughly enjoying them. And then maybe in 15, 20 years' time, you get to the peak of your ability, you're playing well and enjoy 4 or 5 years. And then at the age of, say, 50, like every person, your eyesight slows down, your brain slows down, your technique slows down a little bit. You have to work twice as hard to keep that standard going. So you have to have the ability to say, I think I've been long enough in the principal job.
He felt he wasn't playing his best and he wanted to step down from the position. And I remember Mum going to both Friday and Saturday nights concerts, if it was a big concert, just to be supportive.
And I know I was happy to have the 20 years in principal and enjoy it, but I was also lucky enough to get out of the principal job when I felt things were slowing down.
Fortunately then a bass clarinet position was created and Dad's hand was up first.
So I stepped down to bass clarinet for the last 4 years of my playing with Wasso.
Oh, one more thing. Describe your last night in the West Australian Symphony Orchestra when you retired after 42 years, their longest serving player.
Well, I was a little bit disappointed because they threw streamers and balloons and I thought, gee, they really want to get rid of me. They're really celebrating that I'm leaving at last. I'm only joking. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. They took me at the front and I took my final bows. The piece of music was Mahler 1, and the last page I kept on saying, this is it. The last few notes right down to the last note. Put my clarinet down and said, I'm retired. And it took me about 24 hours to get into retirement mood. I didn't miss it one bit, even though I enjoyed it for 42 and a half years. The time was right.
So can you believe that you're both 80 now?
No, I can't. I still feel like 16.
I remember when I turned 70, I was amazed that I was still alive. And here I am at 80, so we'll wait and see.
Many of you would have shared in past celebrations for their 40th, their 50th, their 60th and their 70th birthdays. Dad and I know that Jill with her family have taught just by the way that they've lived their lives, the way to go about doing your job, the way to go about raising your family, And they've taken that a step further, which is they've shown us how the proper way to retire and to enjoy life. They are full of optimism, and I look at them and I say, well, that is how I want to do it. And I think they're an inspiration, and I admire them and love them a great deal, and so I think we should charge our glasses and drink their health. I don't know where mine is. To Jack and Jill.
They're never going to stop.
It's the only one we know. Get on and enjoy yourself. Have a drink. Thank you very much.